Okay, here
And
I'm
we'll
recording.
okay, great. Hello and welcome. I'm Joey Stocks, and I'm here at the pool with Heather Carlucci, psychic medium and medical intuitive, among other things. And we're currently in retrograde, waiting for Graciela Asher to join us. She's having a little bit of technical difficulty. She is a ceremonialist and a Reiki master, among many other things. As soon as she's here, we will get started officially. Today, it's just family. It's just going to be the three of us. It's the two of us at the moment, but it's just going to be the three of us. And hopefully we'll have moments where we take questions from our audience.
It's gonna be a little late because she's having problems with the modem and the Wi-Fi in her building. And so she is fix it.
I wondered, yeah. Oh, bless her heart.
Are ready. Okay.
So I was just thinking right before we logged on, I was thinking about intentionality and manifestation.
Okay.
was in my head, and a story came to mind. I know you're surprised by that, Heather. About my experience with that, and it was not anything that I actually knew anything about when it was happening. So I thought that I would tell that, and then maybe we could dissect the workings of it.
Okay.
And how that might apply to other people. So, February of 1995, I was an acting intern in Jackson, Mississippi. That's not the punchline, that's just the setup.
That would be good. That'd be a good punchline.
It would. And I did not have my next gig lined up. I was 3 months from ending my internship, and I did not have the next gig lined up. So my friend Francine told me about a giant cattle call audition that was happening just up the road in Memphis. And so my friend of mine and I got in the car, we drove to Memphis. It was this weekend conference where a big bunch of theaters were there, and a big bunch of actors and other theater professionals were there. And it was like a one-stop shopping experience for people to look for their theater professionals for their season. So she and I are in this big, giant holding area, basically scoping out cute guys.
What else would you do?
Well, this was a new experience for me because I was barely a year out of the closet at this point. I was a late bloomer. I was 20, I just turned 29 years old. And so, guys would come in and she would go, "Ooh, he's cute." And I would be like, "No, he's not." And then I would say, "Oh, look, he's cute." And she'd be like, "No, he's not. Look at the shoes." You've got a lot to learn, bless your heart. So one guy walks in and we both immediately go, "Whoa, he's cute." She was like, "I saw him first, so I'm going to go talk to him first." And I was like, "He's carrying a purse. I think he's for dudes." I was right, by the way. I said, I think he's for dudes.
Oh, for dudes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I was right. Anyway, so the way that this audition worked is that there were hundreds of actors there, and they would take us in groups of 25. You would sit in the audience, and when they would call your number, you'd walk up onto the stage, and you had 90 seconds to deliver a monologue or a song, and then get the fuck off stage. So the guy ahead of me, Drew, walked up on stage. Of course, I'm in my head thinking about the thing that I'm there to do, number one. And number two, thinking about cute guy who just walked in, who we both scoped out, who was carrying a purse, is sitting next to me by random coincidence. Mm-hmm. And Drew does his monologue. I remember nothing about it. I didn't remember his name. I remembered nothing. He goes and he sits down. I go up on stage. I do my monologue. I basically remember nothing to this day about how that was. Doesn't matter. I sit down. Then all of my rapt attention is on cute guy. And he starts talking, and then as he's talking, he reaches behind his back and produces a baseball, like it was a magic act, right? It was like, where the fuck did that come from? Was that in his shirt? Was it in his pants? How did you do that? It was a fucking baseball. I missed this. I didn't see anything when he walked up on stage. We could see his back. There was nothing there. How did this happen? And the monologue was about the significance of this baseball. And I was like, oh, fuck, he brought a prop. Snap. I never thought to bring a prop. That's so cool. Everybody's going to want him. By the way, I was right. Everybody wanted him. Everybody remarked on the baseball thing. So then cut to, the auditions are over with. It's the end of the day. The auditions are over with, or the first round of auditions are over with. And what happens at this conference is then everyone goes to this hotel, and you get a list of the theaters who have called you back. And so you're looking through the list, you find the places that have called you back, and then basically you spend until the wee hours of the morning roaming the halls of this hotel looking for the room number of the person who called you back. If that sounds seedy and suspicious, it is. Don't send your children to this. So
Instagram it.
So I'm like, you know, we're roaming the halls looking for the numbers, and I find myself outside of one of these places. Graciella's here, yay!
Yay!
Hello, you're here.
I did it.
You look fabulous.
They tried it. They tried it. Here.
You get it.
You look fabulous. So I'm telling a story. I'm going to wrap it up as quick as I can. So we're roaming the halls. I find this room. There's a whole bunch of people sitting down in the hallway around the doorway of this thing, because this guy, the guy who's the artistic director who's calling people back, is behind schedule. And so I plot myself down in the hallway, and I plot myself down next to, by coincidence, Drew, who is the guy who was right ahead of me in this first round of auditions. And we apparently had a long conversation during which I talked about this cute guy who did the baseball monologue. Do you know him? Do you know his name? I went, apparently we had probably a 30-minute conversation. We go into the guy's room, and he starts taking people in groups because he's so behind schedule. We all go in, he asks us some random questions. He writes a few notes down. We go back, nothing happens. As I'm leaving the hotel that night at like 1:30, 2 in the morning, it was something awful. And it's just still swarming with actors trying to get their callbacks in. I see the cute guy, and I was like, oh shit, oh my God. If I get in the car with my friend and she says, did you talk to him? And I didn't, she will never let me live this down, ever. So I've got to at least say something. And so I'm racking my brain. What am I going to say? And so I walked up to him, and I can't for the life of me remember what I said, but it was some lame comment about the baseball that he used in his monologue. And he turned around and stepped very close to me and smiled and spoke in this warm, soft voice and said, oh, it's from this play called blah, 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 and it's written by blah, blah, blah. And have you ever read any of his other work? He writes some beautiful things. And I, of course, I have no follow-up to this. I'm just like, And then he says, you know, you should check it out, you know, probably be a good monologue for you. You know, you should, you know, I don't have any hold over this monologue. It's, you know, whatever. He was lovely. And then he walks away. And so I go get in the car, and I'm feeling like I probably was not the smoothest person in the world. And also an odd sense of satisfaction, because still being a fledgling out of the closet who had only been on 3 first dates, I'd never been on a second date at that point, ever, at the age of 29. I get in the car, and I said, I saw him and I spoke to him. And she said, what did you say? And I told her, and she kind of went, really? Did he say anything back? And I told her, and she said, did you get his number? And it honestly did not occur to me. Like, that wasn't even in my brain. Nothing was in my brain, frankly. She did not let me live it down. The entire drive back from Memphis, Tennessee to Jackson, Mississippi, which is roughly 3 hours, y'all, was her just going off on, you idiot, you should have gotten his number, blah, blah, blah. This was way before social media, before we all had phones in our pockets, before anybody had a home computer. It was way before any of that. And so I get back, and I was being a really serious, good, dedicated actor at the time, and I was keeping an acting journal in which I would write profound, deep observations about my rehearsal process and about what happened in performance today and about my character analysis. And it was just dreck, ridiculous, horrific, awful shit. And so I'm sitting there, I'm still wound up. It's quite early in the morning. I think it was like about 5 a.m. at the point, but maybe by the time we got back. And I was wound up and couldn't sleep. And so I pull out my acting journal and I was like, okay, I've got to write about how my monologue went, how I felt about it. Did I get callbacks? Blah, 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 blah. It's just dreck again. I'm just blah, 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 blah. And then I stopped and I wrote, I was most impressed by this guy who did a monologue about a baseball, and he had the baseball. And then I stopped writing, and I remember distinctly writing, I have a feeling I'm going to see him again soon. And I closed my journal and I went to sleep, and hours later I woke up and went about my day. This was in February. I would say it was maybe early April. It was probably early April. I had gotten no further contact from any of the theaters that had called me back. So I was like, fuck, I don't have another gig. Out of the blue, this place in Kentucky calls me. It was the one that had all the people gathered outside in the hallway because he was so far off schedule, offering me a job, a whole season. They produced a summer season. Great. So I call him up. First of all, I vetted it to find out, is he cool? Is this legit? Is it on the up and up? Everybody's like, yeah, he's great. You're going to love it. It's going to be fantastic. So I give him a call. We check it out. Looks good. I say yes. He mails me a contract. I sign it. I mail it back. And the start date is the day after my contract ends in Mississippi. Wow. So my contract ends that morning. The next morning, I pack up my Honda Civic and I drive to Kentucky. I pull up. There's a stage manager to meet me. She says, we have actor housing over here. We've randomly paired people up based on their ages and their common background. Just let us know if there's a problem. Okay, fine, no problem. She was like, you're a non-smoker, so you're in with the non-smokers. Fantastic. She takes me to the space. I get there, we open up the door, and at the front door is this guy named Drew. And he says, oh my God, hi, good to see you again. And I had no recollection of who the hell he was, had no clue. And then he proceeds to tell me, oh, I was in your audition group. I auditioned right in front of you. Then later, we sat in the hallway and we talked for 45 minutes to an hour for this job that we're both at. Aww. And I said, we did? And he said, yeah, you kept talking about the guy who did the baseball monologue. And I went, and suddenly my brain flipped. I didn't remember him. I never remembered him, by the way. Bless his heart. Such a nice guy, Drew. Great guy. But I did not remember him. And I said, is he here? And he said, is who here? And I said, the guy who did the baseball monologue. And he went, I don't know. I don't know him. I don't know. An hour after I checked in, we had a company meeting for the entire company of actors. We walk in the door, and there's the guy who did the baseball monologue. And I turn around, Drew, who is about 3 or 4 inches shorter than I am. I turned around, and this is not like me. I'm not a physical person. I turned around and I grabbed him by the shirt. He's a stranger. I grab him by the shirt and lift him off the ground and go, oh my God, he's here. Drew calms me down and he was like, yeah, I see that. Great, cool. We sit down, company meeting happens. I'm thinking to myself, Jesus, I've got to get there. So I go, we talk. Later, we date. We move in together. We're together for almost 18 years.
Oh, I did not know that was going to go that way.
So I'm cutting to the chase because Mark just said, get to the point. So intention, manifestation. That's that, right?
That's your question.
So that's my story about intention and manifestation. I knew nothing about, I mean, for me as an actor, intention is just, what does your character want when you walk on stage, right? But beyond that, I had no clue. Like, this is a thing you should have in real life. It never occurred to me. That's how flaky and naive I was and am. So the power of intention, the power of manifestation, the power of writing those things down, right? That's where I thought we would start the conversation. Go.
Just so
That's
glad
all I have to offer the whole day. I'm just going to sit here and ask you all questions now.
we're just glad we have her. Oh, we're glad we have her not across the street at a cafe, but actually in our home. So I think we were manifesting that while you were talking.
We were.
Getting her here.
I was like freaking out. I'm like, no, why? Our whole building went out. I don't even know why. The whole building. And I live in a huge building. If anybody lives in Manhattan, you know that these are like these big giant buildings, and the whole building went out. And I was like, what? I was like, right now, really? So my roommate was like, oh, well, you can go across the street. I was like, no, that's talk about manifestation. I'm like, no, that's not gonna happen. That's not gonna happen. So yes, here we are.
So Graciela, beyond today and your recovery of your internet for your entire building, thank you for manifesting that on behalf of everybody in your building. What are some? I mean, tell me about your experience with that.
With manifesting?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I got a doozy of a story, but I'm gonna try to also make it really short.
Okay.
There's so many instances, but the one that just came to me when you asked is probably one of the most impactful in my life and in my healing journey. So like where should I start? So long story short, I was adopted. I was born in Colombia, and I was raised by a Jewish family in Long Island. And growing up, my name that I knew of myself was Erica Brooke Asher. And that's who I was. I was Erica Brooke Asher. Like, you know, if your parents are gonna name you something, you're not gonna think that there's any question about it.
Yep.
Well, going along the lines, I never, people always ask me when I found out, or then when they found out I was adopted, they would ask me, oh, do you want to find your biological family? And actually, it really wasn't a thing until it was a thing. Like, all of a sudden, one day, literally, like, just one day, it was like, oh my God, like, I think I need to find my family. I was in therapy, and my therapist she suggested it. And she told me that she had a client of hers that recently went on that journey and found their family. And she was telling me it wasn't like the best story, but the fact that she went on this journey was like really important. And I was like, okay. And as soon as she told me that like somebody else did it, and they found something in it, I was like, I have to do it. And I knew that I was going to be met with a lot of resistance from a lot of people. But it was just this, like, how you said, you were like, how you had this like innate feeling of like, I don't know, I think I'm going to meet him again. I'm going to see him again. I had the feeling like, I'm going to find her. Like, I don't know where, I don't know how, but specifically my mom, which was another interesting thing. I never thought about my father, not in a, like, not that I didn't care. It was just like, there was something that I was like, no, it was like, I needed to find my mother.
You needed to connect with your mother. Yeah.
So I was just like, okay, well, and it went from like a little thing to like I was convicted, like, and like I said, a lot of people were not happy about it. My Jewish parents, my grandma, God bless her. My grandma's 98 years old, and I love you, Grandma. but she's racist. She just is, and it's a fact. And the first thing out of her mouth was, you know, she's Czechoslovakian, like she had like came from there, like through Ellis Island, like that whole thing. And she was just like, oh, why do you want to go to visit those savages? I was like, you know that I was born there, right? I'm like, you know that like this is the woman that birthed me. And so, and a lot of people were just telling me that, oh, that's impossible. Like, how are you don't have any information. My parents were, you know, but I saw myself meeting this woman. Like, I didn't actually see it, but I was just like not giving up on the idea. I was like, no, like I can do this. And I was so convicted. So I didn't know how it was going to happen, but I was just like kind of like left it up, how they say, like, you know, just give it up and it's going to manifest. And this was before I really even knew what manifesting was, or like
Sure.
any, this
Same.
my journey, like any of that. So I was just like, okay, well, here we go. And person by person, my friends, my like really close friends who I thought would like get it, who would be supportive, they're like, no, that's impossible. Like, what, like, where are you going to start? Because my parents, this is another thing, my parents weren't supportive. So they really also didn't want to tell me anything. So me and my partner at the time, we decided it was actually his idea. He was just like, oh, well, you should go, but why don't we go to the government office? And I was like, what? And he was just like, yeah, let's just go see what we find there. Long story short, we go there, and this lady was like, I can't find you. This Erica Asher, she's like, I can't find you. She's like, I have your date of birth, your parents' name, where you were born, like not where you were born, but your address where you were raised, but it's under a different name. And I was like, what? So that was the day that I found my name, Graciela. Before then, I had no idea I was Graciela. So she slid a piece of paper written Graciela Tibequera, and that was how I found out my actual biological name. And
Wow.
then from that on, that was key. That was the key to everything. And from there, it was like everything just happened. We went to Colombia. I saw back then there was this thing called couch surfing. I don't know if people still use it, but it was like this platform where travelers that, you know, you want to just stay for free with somebody that you don't know. Probably isn't like the safest, but I did it many times. And I also had people stay with me, and it was great. And I was like, you know what? When we were in Colombia, we needed a place to stay. And I saw this guy, and there was all these other people, but I was like, no, this is the guy that we need to stay with. I reached out to him. He ended up working for the government. He ended up, I mean, there's a whole long story, but he ended up leading me to meet my mother. And
Incredible.
the whole way there was like all of these like crazy obstacles and everything, but yeah, like it happened, and it was so seamless. Like these things kept on happening, these people kept on showing up, and it was because I was so determined. You couldn't tell me anything. There was so many things that I can't even like get into it right now, but like crazy obstacles where you're like, wait, why did you keep going?
Sure. Yep. I understand.
I was like, no, like I have to meet her. And when I did meet my mom, like it was just so ridiculous, because she told me that my brother basically knew, like he had a feeling that I was coming, like kind of how you knew. And I feel like one of the biggest things about manifestation is to follow your intuition, like follow your gut, and convict yourself. Like even if it maybe at first you don't believe it,
yeah,
like trick yourself. Like almost you have to trick yourself into believing whatever it is that you really want, and act like it already happened. Because for me, I was like, oh, I'm like, you couldn't tell me ish. Like police were involved. Like there was like a lot of situations.
Yeah.
And I was just like, nope. Like my mama, I'm gonna meet my mama, and you cannot tell me anything. And sure enough, it happened, and I saw it. And before I even knew what visualization was, it's like innately I knew that this had to happen, and it was
Yeah.
so healing. It was so beautiful, and I don't know what would have happened if I never really did what I needed to do
Sure.
to make that happen.
Yeah.
'Cause- yeah.
Yeah. Heather, can you talk a little bit about energetically what happens when we really focus in that way, and we very clearly state, you know, this, and you focus on it in that way that Graciela just described, and to a degree what I just described?
I think it's a couple of things. I think it's many things at work. And my idea of energy is always a tipping point of lots of things, right? There is a somewhat amount of fate that you're going to get there however you get there, right? It's a little bit pre-planned, it's a little bit preordained, the whole 9 yards, right? There's a little bit of that because there's certain things in everybody's life, and I'm sure, and let me know, Graciela, if you see this as well. When I'm reading somebody, there's certain things that they're going to have to do in this life. Now, how they get there and what that looks like, you never know. And it can change depending on kind of what your day-to-day is as well, you know, and also how you need to learn the lesson, right? So there's that, right? That man was going to come into your life no matter what. If it was because of that baseball and that monologue, or you were going to run into each other later, it was going to happen no matter what. When we, and on the idea of, you know, when we manifest things, and I'm really careful about the word manifest, like I'm about a lot of work, because everything gets sort of, you know, as things in spirituality and wellness become more mainstream, people think that like, well, I'm manifesting, why isn't it working? Like it's a magic trick, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it is also like, well, what is really best for you? And sometimes we don't know what's best for us. Sometimes we really have other, like when I teach classes on psychic level intuition, the first thing I say is, you have to release absolutely every single social construct you know. And that is a lot of self-work because we don't even understand what social constructs we have in our head about anything ever.
Yeah.
Right? Because getting through social construct is how we survive the first like 10 years of our lives, right? How we fit in so we don't die is basically human form on the earth, right? Even if we have parents who we don't agree with, we've learned their language because that's how they've lived on the earth and they're giving it to us, right? And then we get to figure out later on how awful it is or what works for us, or the fact that pieces kind of work for us and other pieces do not, right?
Right.
But with manifesting, it literally is the shifting of the energy or the ions around you as to like what gets you going. And you know, I'm like the science nut with this stuff. It's like things feed your adrenaline and connect with like fate and energy and spirits and all that when that thing is correct, right? When the thing is right. And sometimes it's like, well, it ended badly. It's like, sometimes that's the experience you have to have, right? Sometimes like, Graciela, you could have told that story and been like, it was the worst decision I ever made, right? But you found your name, you found your mother, and for you, you understood about yourself that that's what was needed. You could have stayed there. You could have done a million things with that information, where however it took you, and you said it was a big part of your healing and a big part of your spiritual journey. I think you said both those things, right? So when I read it, and everybody reads so differently, so I don't like to sort of put a big, like, this is the way it is, because I don't know. I know, you know, like I always say, like, I'm pretty much as cynical about this work as I am knowing that it's nothing but true,
Yeah.
because we have different ways of, I may not be the person that communicates the way you need me to communicate the energy. Right?
Yeah.
But when we deal with manifesting and we deal with intention, even if manifesting is never about the goal point, it is always about what you need to do to get there. Because when we decide that there is something we want, we learn everything about ourselves if we're willing to really to look at ourselves. If you look at it as something so driven that you need that one thing and nothing else goes on, that's exactly how we get to where we are right now in the world. People just need the goal, the thing, the it, right?
Right.
So people have to be really very understanding about what energy is and how we deal, in my view, of intention and manifestation. But so much of what you're both talking about were things that, Joey, you were going to meet that guy. We all know that, right? You were going to meet that guy. That's how you got to meet the next guy.
That's right.
We all love and adore, right?
That's right.
Graciela,
That's another story for another time.
a whole other story. It's an amazing story. But Graciela's story is a beautiful version of it, because no matter what you needed to get from like Erica Brooke Asher to Graciela Asher, right? However that was going to happen, it was never going to be easy, because things that are worth it are never easy. Sorry.
Yeah.
Right there, that was the point. Right? So that when I read it, I'm always sort of like, yeah, there's manifesting, but there's also like making the ignition go, because you're just like, it's time for me to start moving in that direction at whatever cost. It's
Right.
It's the fear. I think it's taking fear.
Is it somewhat also, just to say what you just said, maybe in a different way, is it accurate to say that maybe the manifesting, as we're talking about it here, is where intuition meets goal, and that the goal is actually driven by the intuition? Because I didn't write in my journal before I went to that audition, right? He walked in the room, and something inside that I couldn't at that time, given my incredible naivete and inexperience, couldn't quite describe, but did on some level, deep level, recognize in him.
Right.
Oh, him.
So you have
That
goal.
there he is. And then a goal was formed, right?
But you were already going to meet him. So you have fate with goal, with intuition. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
The goal was not something you had in mind. You just had a feeling about it.
That's right.
Feelings.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I feel like the same is true with Graciela's story. You know, the story of you met someone who tracked down
That's right.
his birth parents, and you suddenly, it was like, I'm supposed to do that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't both parents necessarily. It was, I'm supposed to do that and find my mom.
Right. And the crazy thing too is that if she never, like, she definitely planted that seed. So that's like something like where you like got that spark of like, so the seed was planted, and then all these, like, when I was convicted, when I was like, okay, this is gonna happen, all the players came up, like the actors that I needed, because the guy that I stayed at his house with couch surfing, he worked for the government. He was able to put my name in the system.
Yeah.
Like, that wouldn't have had, like, I don't know how long it would have taken.
Where was this? In Colombia?
Huh?
Was this in Colombia?
In Colombia. He worked and I mean, everything happened so amazingly. We went on a Friday, and the government, I forgot what it's called, the embassy or whatever, is closed of the United States in Colombia on Fridays. Don't know why. Didn't look it up. We just were like, oh, let's just go. So we had to stay with him over the weekend, and he was like, wait, why are you here anyways? And then that opened up this whole thing. I was like, oh, I have to find my mom. I have to find my mom. And then he was like, oh my gosh, well, that's easy. He was like, oh, let me just look her up. And he put her in the computer. And literally, that's how I got to my birth certificate. And then all these other people started playing. So it's when you said like your goal, Joey, and fate, because like Heather said, I had to meet her. And why it wasn't my father was because I found out my father was murdered earlier, like many years ago. So
Wow.
feel that connection to find I innately kind of knew that he wasn't alive. So, and I feel like when we trust our intuition, it also opens up others to do the same.
Yeah.
And if we don't follow it, again, like Heather said, things are gonna happen, but it might not be so easily. Like, you know, I think with the more conviction, then things, the universe just like, it's like, oh, okay, she's ready now. And it's like, and it just gets everybody, all the players into place to make things happen.
This brings me to something that I wanted to bring up here. And this is perfect, because you just said when you listen to your intuition, right? It brings other people, and you behave in that energy. Other than that, it also, other than bringing other people in, right, who listen to their, like, suddenly I'm meeting you and I meet all these people, right, when you're, because I'm listening to myself. But it also creates as you're saying, an equal energy for other people to be in. And somebody asked me the other day if I'd ever heard of this theory or concept, the concept of endearment. And I was like, no, what is that? And he said, when it is the natural order of all living species, actually, when we let ourselves be our natural selves, to go to adjust ourselves to the rhythm of somebody else. Interesting, right? Like how we adjust ourselves. Now, we see this in sometimes the worst of relationships, right? Like abuser and abusee. One begins to behave like the other. But we also see it, especially when we find that moment, when we feel that insane strength from working with our intuition, and we begin to bring people in and allowing people to come to our rhythm. Now, interestingly enough, especially because you're here, Graciela, and I can say it to you, this is when people use drumming for healing.
Oh, yes, yes.
Right? Because it begins to bring everybody to the same tune. It's why like sound and music and rhythm is so powerful. And I had never heard that before.
Yes.
I know. And I was like, it's a scientific fact and that's how people relate to each other. It's how you know, if you've ever, like, as a person suddenly found yourself spending time with another family, and when you finally kind of get used to them, you're kind of in the flow of that group, right? You know, or living with a bunch of other actors, and you kind of find your groove, and you know, you're like, well, somebody came in and they were really calm, and when they were calm, we're all calm too.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Or when somebody was really kind of uptight and frenetic, we got there too. And I thought that was really fascinating. So that's exactly what you were saying. You're like, when we are open with our intuition, other people are allowed to be there too, because I know that when I work only from that space, which I try to as much as possible, obviously, but sometimes there are traffic jams and epidemics and things like that you kind of got to like get your footing. I notice that the people around me and the things that are available to me, I don't even really read anything anymore, because it just sort of falls into place.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting, you know, Heather, I guess I'm unfamiliar with that word as well. But what I can say is that the other show that I host with playwrights and theater folks, there was an artistic director on our show who said briefly that there was a scientific study that was done where all the audience members at attending the same play were wired with heart monitors. And the show began, and that there was a point at which, because the actors were also wired with the same heart monitors, and there was a point in the show where the actors and the audience's hearts were all in sync.
Wow.
And they did the test often enough that it was not a random thing that happened once. It is a thing that happens. Theater is a form of ritual.
Wow.
And you know, it doesn't necessarily happen on film. It might just within the audience, but the actors have been filmed and they've already done their thing and it's been consigned to film, and so who knows what their heart rate was doing. But the interesting thing is when you've got everybody live in the same space, that kind of synchronization happens. You literally fall into sync with your heart. I find that to be incredibly interesting and powerful.
I had my assistant bring me the book that my friend sent to me after he told me this. It's called The Healing Power of the Drum. And it's entrainment. And it happened when they just sort of discovered that this happens. It's because a Dutch scientist, Christian Huygens, discovered the concept of entrainment 1665 when he put two pendulum clocks were placed side by side, and no matter what happened, they would eventually go at this. They would be in perfect unison.
Yeah.
They realized that when they started doing it, human beings do it with each other all the time. It's also the same way when we realize when people, in a good way, in this way, why protests begin to bring people in. Because when we feel the need, especially what we're looking at now, we're looking at really well, when people know it's right in here and they feel it, they will go with the energy that's doing the right thing.
Yeah.
If they're healthy. If they're healthy of heart and mind.
Yeah, true. But I love, first, the first thing I wanted to say was that the first thing that popped into my mind about being in sync, like with a group of people, is when I used to be a camp counselor for Girl Scouts. And I was with all these women, and we were together. We were sleepaway camp counselors. And we would start off the summer, our moon cycles or our periods would be at all different times. By the end, we all 30 something of us, we would be on the same cycle. And I was like, oh, this is interesting, right? And then what you said also, Joey, about the heart and then the drum. Well, this is our first instrument. Our heart is our drum.
Right.
So you know, it is the unifying force that keeps beat. So if that is true, that like, you know, we're all coming into unity eventually together, I would love to know, Heather, does that talk about like what the variables need to be, like what, like, is there a thing that when people come together that makes it faster or slower for that unison to happen? Like, the people have to have like a relatable experience together or come from similar backgrounds, or it could just be anyone, anywhere, just the drum bringing them together and it unifies them in that way.
Well, it's interesting. I hadn't got, I mean, I literally just got the book. So, and it just so happened that we're talking about it, but there is a whole thing on, because it used to be that women were the only drummers in many, you know, tribal regions.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing.
Right. And there's a book that they reference here called When the Drummers Were Women. So I will send you that information.
Fantastic.
By Lane Redmond. And there's a whole thing here. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, obviously, at the moment, but there's a whole thing on that. I think that, I think the interesting thing about when you say, what is the one thing, like the factor that will kind of get us all to do one thing? Obviously, there are people who can step in and understand what this is, and it goes from the worst of people to the best of people, right? You know, we have brilliant leaders and we have scary leaders and people who bring in groups of people, and I think that's one thing. But But what I think is really interesting, and when you're talking about the intuition thing from when you're open, the next person can be open and they don't even realize they're doing it,
Mhm.
is that when we do it without ego, it just sort of settles in and you can sort of see the fact that it's so much a part of nature. It's the same thing like when, you know, when we say, oh, I went on vacation, I got to see a little nature, I feel so much better now. It's like because the heart comes down. Right? And we just feel better because we're living on the earth like we're supposed to be living. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I was kind of following along those same lines. For those of us who don't necessarily call ourselves, who don't identify as people who are light workers or certainly as involved and as professional as the two of you, and we hear the phrase "listen to your intuition." Sometimes it can sound like a very abstract concept to us, right? Especially, I'm just going to, for myself, I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody but myself. I will say that, you know, I know what it's like when somebody says, gives me a list of tasks. Like, here are some things you need to learn in order to pass this test in school. Here are some things you need to do in order to have your room clean.
Right.
Here are some things you need to do in order to get a job, to get to that job, to get home from that job, to set yourself up for retirement, right? They're like check boxes. But I don't, like, sometimes when I hear listen to your intuition and I start looking for the check boxes, it doesn't, I'm lost, right? So for those of us who are lay people, what can you help us? Can you guide us in any way?
Well, I think for me, I would say it is something that's very personal. And that's why it's hard to find these check boxes, because for everyone is different. Like, for example, some people, they might hear, like they might just get, like how you kind of just knew, right? Like you just got this feeling. So it's hard. It's a little bit more challenging to do. Okay, well, if you have, you know, your palms start to get sweaty and then you start feeling your heart rate speed up, you know, like it literally is so different for everyone, that I think for me, getting in touch with your intuition is following one. I think something that can really help people, that I suggest, is just like following what you love. Like going in that vibration in general can help, as far as like, okay, you know what, I trusting yourself and stop and releasing that fear and that doubt, because
And
sometimes
and as Heather said, ego as well, right?
right, because that can be so loud that you might not even be like, what intuition, like where is that voice, like where is this thing?
Yeah.
And so it's I feel, to quiet, and that's why meditation, doing different things like meditation, yoga can help, because it helps us, one, come into our body, because sometimes we're up here.
Mm-hmm.
and this is like what Heather was saying, can be like that ego part, and it's like, okay, but just silence yourself without the judgment, get into what you really like what is it, and start following that. And in my experience, it has been in that quiet space of doing what I love that I started to hear easier. And for me, that looks like, you know, I'll get visions. I'm a very visual. I'll get little, all of a sudden I'll see something and I'm like, oh, okay. And then I'll just follow it and let that happen and not ignore it. Because that's another thing. People be like, oh, well, why was I thinking of this? And also have an understanding that, okay, if you're asking the universe, okay, please send me some signs, they're going to send you some signs, but we have to be open to receiving them and to noticing. So when we slow down and when we notice and be open and receptive, And that in general is kind of like the divine feminine, just being open and receptive, being expansive, being, not being like, okay, it's gonna come like this. And that's the
Right.
expectation. So if we just kind of like sit back, be open, notice, be aware of patterns. So certain things, the universe will send us certain pattern. Oh, I just saw a butterfly. Oh, look, that girl has a butterfly on her shirt. Oh, that, and you start like noticing these patterns that are happening throughout the day. They're trying to tell you something. And
Yeah.
maybe, you can't, figure it out on your own, but then looking up the certain symbols, noticing what your body is doing. So if your body is getting hot, if you start, all of a sudden when you see someone that it's not like a love thing, but you just see someone and you start like the back of your neck starts standing up. Our spirit guides speak to us in different ways, and we just need to notice and be aware of our body more. And so there isn't an actual checkbox, I don't think, and I don't know how you have a checkbox, like ultimate checkbox, but I would just say just being still, a little bit more still, especially when you're asking people. Just think, okay, is it gonna come right away? But just in general, be more receptive and notice certain things happening more in your body. And I think that can help.
Yeah, thank you. That's fantastic. I just want to, I want to be aware right now of our time and also of our audience. So in the few minutes we have remaining, if anybody has a question for us, you can send it to us in the chat field. Yeah, so being aware, you were talking about meditation and breathing. Heather, do you have anything to add to those things for those of us who need to sort of tap into our general awareness?
I will. There was something that I noticed in the last class that I taught that comes up a lot, and I wouldn't have thought about it before unless like every student was like, "Oh well, yeah." One of the first exercises I was saying was just, what's the first thing that comes to your mind, and you have to believe it. And that's one of the things we don't do, because we can see like all the butterflies in the world and be like, no. But it's like you have to leave certain room for the fact that, we're told that we're taught in so many ways to be cynical, as sort of a sense of relinquishing our power about what we know to be true. And one of the things that happens a lot is I said, okay, I want you to would do the beginning of the exercise and say, okay, these are all people who are already like wellness professionals, healthcare professionals, doctors, things like that. And I said, I want you to think of the first person that comes into your mind, and then let the energy tell you what they want to tell you about that person. And more than half the people, there are 8 students in this one class, more than half of the people, so let's say between like 5 of them, were like, well, and they were very honest about it, which I appreciated, but I was like, no. They were like, well, I thought of my husband, and I was like, no, not him. Because that's too easy. And then I thought of my roommate, but I had just seen her, so I didn't want to do that. And I was like, no, if you get the image, you need to know something about that person. I don't care if you think you know everything about everybody. You can't. That's it. You can live with somebody 100 years. You're never going to know everything about them.
It's interesting. So there's a point at which, and I experience this myself too. When something happens, I immediately judge it. And like I think about something and I'm like, oh, I'm thinking about that because so-and-so just said that 5 minutes ago. Or I watched this TV show last night and, the whole theme of the episode was about that. And so that's why it's on my brain, right? Instead of, and then I shut it down.
Right, exactly. You shut it down. And so it's sort of interesting. And these are people who are like, I'm here for my intuition. And every single person was like, well, I thought of so-and-so. And then I said, okay, everyone's homework. I want you to go back to that person that you thought about and get some information, see what the information is. Everybody came back the next week going, oh my God.
Yeah.
The roommate was moving out without telling anybody. That was a biggie, you know.
Wow.
Like, look at your husband or your partner, or it happened to be this person's husband. It was like, look at that person who immediately comes into your head. Look, maybe you don't want to talk about your mother, but if the mother's the first thing that comes into your head, then listen to it, right?
That's right.
I think that is so much in that way, because we're taught, you know, we're always taught, don't listen to your intuition, listen to me. Right? That's parenting 101 at least in America.
Right. Well, I mean, you know, if your gut, if the kid's gut is, I'm going to kick my brother in the face, then yeah, you might want to rethink that.
Kicking the brother in the face is different, but as we all know, there are different levels of, you know, don't kick your brother in the face is a very good one.
Yeah.
Although who knows
Just
what that.
don't. Just don't. Darren has written in the chat. He says, I used to see 333 throughout the day for years. I found comfort in this. In the past 6 months, it's almost stopped. Any idea why these signs may have stopped? Ooh, that's a really cool question. I know nothing about numbers. Numbers frighten me, so I'm going to let somebody else talk about that.
Do they frighten you? That's interesting. Wow.
Yeah. Oh, I have trauma around numbers, but we'll talk about that another time.
The guest that we want to have on, a really amazing numerologist that I get a reading from every year, and I can't wait till he can make it, because they've been, yeah, that's going to be great. That's going to be great.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Well, you know, more than I always think of seeing something like, not because I don't really know numbers. I'm very open about what I do not specialize in. I don't specialize in numbers, but for me, like, I never saw anything with numbers anywhere. And in the last, I want to say month, holy cow, everywhere, all the time. I only pick up my phone and look at the time when it happens to be like one of two times. And it's constant. Or if I'm talking about a number or a date, it comes up on my phone.
Yeah.
Within minutes, always. But this when things go away, which they do, I always feel like it just means it's time for new miracles.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You're like, you know, Darren's been doing a lot of research into this sort of, and hang out with us every week. And Darren, maybe it's just time for a new sign for you of comfort.
Right. Yeah.
Do you know a lot about numbers, Graciela?
I know a good amount about numbers. I'm not a numerologist at all. Like, I mean, but it was a part of my journey. Like, I started seeing numbers all the time. Like, I've always kind of had an affinity with numbers, but I hated math. Like, I don't like to count them. I don't like to do anything with them. Like, I like, you know, my number, that when I played soccer was 17, and I like stuff like that. But with numbers, I've noticed that when different numbers start coming up, or if one, like you said, it goes away, then it's just like a different energy, and maybe you received the message that you needed to of that number that it was bringing to you, Darren, and now maybe you might start seeing another number, maybe you won't. I know for me, 1111 is and always has been, like, for a long time, like something that, and that's like, you know, the gateway number, 1111. People always say, like, make a wish, 1111. And it's supposed to be the great manifestation number, 1111. And I do love the double and the triple digits, because when the numbers come like that, they're like intensifying. So it, like, the 333, Darren, that you saw, it, like, you know, the 3 is the trilogy in some spiritual practices, but it's really a powerful, like, number for your, like, I believe, actually, I don't even want to say, because I don't want to say if I'm not 100% sure, but the fact that it is like triple, you see at 333, whatever that 3 is symbolizing, it's like extra, like, powerful, because it's like reiterating it yourself. It's almost like the way that the universe kind of repeats itself, like, hey, listen to this, listen to this, listen to this, so it empowers it even more.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and there's rhythm in repetition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To tie that all back into our rhythm conversation.
Yes, definitely. So I'm I'm excited to have this person on though, the numerologist, because
we got to get him on. He had a bit of a family thing going on with health and stuff, so he hasn't been able to. But yeah, Dale Spencer, numerologybydale.com. I get my yearly reading from him because he's fabulous and he's so good.
Yeah, he looks really cool. I can't wait to have him on. Karen Young says she wonders why she's not seeing the chat activity. I think Mark told me that last week when people were typing things into the chat that he couldn't see it as well. So I don't know what that's about, but that's why I'm reading things out loud. Darren said in reply to Graciela as she was talking about the numbers that reappear for her, he also sees the numbers 1111, which I think is really interesting. I see that we're at 12:07. We officially started at 11:07, so we're right at an hour. Just to sort of wrap things up here.
Everybody.
Thank you all for being here, and Graciela, thank you for that beautiful story. I love hearing that. Yeah. And yeah, thank you, Heather. Thank you to The Rock and his wet T-shirt and puppies. That is going to recur to me, I think, many, many times throughout the day. Thank you all for being here. We're taking next week off, right, Heather?
Yeah, taking next week off, and then we'll be back. We will have Shine will be coming on, and actually we're having this. Yeah, Shine's going to be coming on in a few weeks, and then also on the 18th we're going to have Vanessa Cordonio again, who actually you missed Graciela, but it didn't record, so we're bringing her back because I want the two of you to meet in a big way.
Yeah, same.
She just so good, so good.
She's great. Yeah, we're so looking forward to talking to her again. She was great to hang out with.
Yeah. Okay. Mwah.
Thank you all so much.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Be well.